Creed 3 comes out in theaters this week, and that means we have now 9 Rocky and Creed films to rank from worst to best. Now, I'm very excited to do this list because I'm a massive fan of this. I have a boxing glove signed by Sylvester Stallone himself. What a great present that was for my dad. This franchise is very near and dear to my heart, and with that said, I'm very excited to talk about all 9 Rocky and Creed films from worst to best, including Creed 3. Now, make sure to leave your thoughts down below, hit that like and subscribe button, and without further ado, let's get into this ranking. Down at my number 9 is actually a film, and let me say this, even though this is at my number 9, I don't think it's as bad as many people make it out to be. Some people say this is one of the worst films ever made. You're too harsh. At my number 9 is Rocky 5. To be honest, up until this year, this was actually the only Rocky film I had actually never seen in my entire life. I just always put it to the side because my dad said it wasn't great, a lot of my friends said it was never great, so I'm like, I'm just never gonna watch it. Now that I'm a cinephile for everyone, I had to check it out, and I liked it, honestly. Don't even get me wrong, there are a lot of stupid elements in this movie, like, specifically any way that Rocky treats his son in here, it kind of just annoyed me. Like, once Tommy started being in their lives, I'm like, Rocky, what are you doing? Other than that, I actually did really like the entire tone for this. It kind of took it back to the tone of Rocky 1 and 2. Still some cheesy moments for sure. Seeing Rocky as the mentor in here and actually not jumping back in the ring was phenomenal. I mean, it does end still with him in like a back alley brawl. Badass, of course. And that I still find it dumb that Rocky lost everything, like, because of some stupid accounting error. That's just dumb. There is a lot of dumb things in here, but it's still an enjoyable film for what it is, and as an epilogue to Rocky 4, I think it overall does work, taking away almost everything from this character and really much leaving him into the mentor role here. Now, there are definitely a lot of things that I would absolutely change in here, but I do think Rocky versus Gunn, and specifically everything in the final act, does really build up to an epic conclusion, and while it does feel a little bit slow and lazy at times, it's still enjoyable. It's a good Rocky film. And now we get into my number 8, which is Rocky 3. Now, this is very much where the camp and the cheese started to just infuse into this franchise at an all-time high. This is absolutely the campiest Rocky film yet.
Don't get a sucker, no statue. Give him guts.
That said, there is still a lot of excellent scenes all along the way, specifically Rocky, his training, and Mickey scenes are phenomenal and still very emotional. I actually do love the way that, once he loses Mickey, it kind of pushes him to have to go up against the villain of the first 2 Rocky films and kind of become friends. Weirdly enough, even though Clubber Lang is not one of the strongest villains in this franchise, Mr. T does a pretty damn good job being intimidating, even if it is very cheesy. And the whole Hulk Hogan scene in here was absolutely wild. Like, what? Rocky 3 is just a lot of fun, and even though it does really much lose a lot of emotional depth, really the only emotional thing is Mickey's part between Mickey and Rocky, I will say that this is a very important film that does build off Rocky 1 and 2. Honestly, when you look at everything, you see the relationship between Rocky and Creed and how personable that is. Weirdly enough, without this movie, I don't know if Creed would be as strong as it is. Now we get to my number 7, which is Rocky Balboa. Now, I know a lot of people absolutely love this, might even have it as one of their favorite Rocky films, if not one of their favorites, because it does still have one of the best monologues in all of the Rocky franchise.
About how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Even on rewatch, I was about to give this a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, but goddamn, that speech is, again, just perfect. Honestly, if I were to do top 10 best scenes in the Rocky franchise, that might actually make the top 5. One reason this movie is a little bit downer for me and not as high is because it does feel a little bit more nostalgic and walking down memory lane. I guess when you really do look at everything, this is kind of one of the first legacy sequels that we ever got in a weird way. Walking down memory lane, which I understand is completely the point of the film, does find a little bit of lack here and there and does slow the film down. I like some of the personal moments that Rocky gets, and specifically really touching into people's lives after losing Adrian. But I do think that after all of that, it does build up into a fantastic third act that really much shows great training, a great fight scene, and a great tie-up to Rocky's story in the boxing ring. Now we are at number 6, which is Rocky 4. Now, full disclosure, I've not seen the director's cut. I was not able to really, honestly, afford just taking the time to go watch it, and I didn't want to watch it illegally. I'm waiting for them to throw it on Blu-ray, so hopefully they do. I've heard that version is actually better than this, but I will not be talking about that. Feel free to rank it in your ranking if you think it is even better than Rocky 4's original cut, which I've heard it is, because Rocky 4 really much is just the film that ended the Cold War in a weird way. And that's enough to give it at least 4 out of 5 stars. Like, the training montages is awesome. The fighting sequence is great. Drago is an intimidating villain. Even though he doesn't really talk, he is very menacing, scary, and absolutely one of my favorite aspects of the entire Rocky franchise. And even the way they brought him into Creed 2 just worked wonders. This is definitely like, if Rocky 3 was where the campiness started to come in, this is absolutely where the camp was just thrown all in. In the end of the day, this is more of a revenge story, and seeing Creed's death in the ring adds again and builds upon, like, when you go and look at what Creed 1 was able to establish, it elevates this film to a different level now. And even though it is campy, and even though it's cheesy, and even though it ended the Cold War, it is very much a movie that is a personal revenge story for Rocky and having to beat someone else who had killed one of his friends. We can all admit that Polly's robot was absolutely stupid, right? Coming to my number 5, and that is Rocky 2, continuing directly after the original Rocky. This is the film that I have not seen in absolutely years until I decided to rewatch it this year. And honestly, with many sequels like this, I feel like in this time period, whether it was like Halloween 2 trying to build off the first one and trying to set up the same scenario and kind of feeling a little bit lazy, I actually find that Rocky 2, for what it's trying to do and build up what many sequels try to do, again, is setting up the same scenario, some weird reason, film actually makes it work. Film actually makes it work and ties up perfectly to the original film, and I actually think it's almost just as good as the original. In fact, 2 and up, I think all these movies are great, if not delightfully almost perfect. I found in this film that it was very much a believable rematch that absolutely builds off that first one in a grand way. So when you do see Apollo Creed versus Rocky Balboa once again, it is top tier action. And even with that said, I do love the aftermath and actually getting to dive a little bit deeper into Rocky's personal life, his life with Adrian now. Even seeing the aftermath of someone's major success when someone gets this big loving story. What happens after that? Now, jumping into my number 4 is the brand new Creed film, Creed 3, which is absolutely the greatest live-action anime film ever created. Michael B. Jordan influenced many anime inspirations in here, which may turn off many people. It did not for me. I thought this has some of the, if not the best action scenes in the entire franchise. Very personable, very emotional, very ferocious, specifically in Jonathan Majors' character, and the way that Michael B. Jordan just held that camera so close to them just felt so great. I think that's saying a lot because specifically when you build off this entire franchise and you look at what Ryan Coogler was able to do with the first Creed film and a lot of the action scenes there, this is Michael B. Jordan being able to take what he's learned from all the great masters that he's worked with and getting to see what he's able to do on the screen here. Specifically just in the last final third act fight scene, it is again one of my favorite things that I've seen in like any boxing film in forever. And again, maybe that's because I'm a little bit biased when it comes down to anime inspired stuff, but it was badass. Jordan has honestly never been better as Creed. I loved him as Apollo, and I think this is a great cap off to his entire trilogy. Jonathan Majors devours the entire film, and it can arguably be referred to as probably the best villain in the entire Rocky and Creed films as well. Just something about his ferociousness and the way that he creates and becomes this character that I absolutely loved. And for me, I just found Creed 3 to just be so damn good. I think that holds it back from actually being a little bit higher on this list is I wish the score was a little bit stronger, as well as the film is a tad bit too short. I think 20 minutes would have really helped develop certain characters and flesh out some of the pacing. Pacing's very fast, but sometimes when you're trying to get to the end of the finish line, I wish you would have spent a little bit more time with certain characters and in certain moments. Which now brings me to my number 3, and that is Creed 2. Now, when we come off Creed 1 and now seeing where Adonis is as a character, I think Creed 2 is a great opening, showing that, you know, the person who had killed his dad now has a son, and his son, they're trying to put together a match, showing kind of the sinister stuff behind some of the sports elements and certain people who are trying to get sport events to happen, and even diving into there a little bit more. I really love how they were able to influence and continue on Adonis's journey as a character, specifically trying to move out of the shadow of his father, but at the same time trying to join back into there and claim that revenge that he really needs to. I love Creed 2 for what it is. I think Stephen Cable Jr. does an amazing job directing this movie. I think the score is absolutely stunning from Ludwig, and I think it really works. And Stallone's storyline in here as well. I love how it's kind of like he's trying to figure out and reconnect with his son as well, which ties greatly back to Rocky Balboa. Just a nice epilogue after Rocky 4, and overall, every time I go back to watch Creed 2, I just get heavily inspired to go out and start working out and punch that bag. I honestly do that with every single Rocky and Creed film, but more enough, Creed 2 is a special movie to me, and I just absolutely adore it. Now, my number 2, this is where the pitch pitchforks are probably going to start to rise. I'm so sorry if you disagree with me. Leave your thoughts down below. But my number 2 is the original Rocky film.
Brother, this guy stinks!
And as I said, I grew up with Rocky. I love this movie. I think it is a masterpiece. I think it's perfect. I think there's nothing wrong with this movie, even if it's a bit dated at times. I think we can be honest with that. I mean, even the way that he sometimes, like, just says Adrian is meme-worthy. Adrian! I mean, what movie doesn't have meme-worthy stuff anymore? It's just, for me, Rocky is the embodiment of a classic movie. It was a Best Picture winner. Sylvester Stallone gave one of the best performances in that film. And even in that year, I would still argue he probably should have won. But when I look at this movie, there's just simply no other way to say it, but it's just perfect. And I think what it was able to do to start this franchise has just created one of the most iconic characters of all time. A true underdog story that is elevated by a score, direction, writing, and specifically a character that comes from one of the lowest places and gets one of the most biggest underdog chances he possibly could have. It's a story of really much talking about started from the bottom, now we are here. Don't think I've ever done a Drake reference in a single one of my videos, but there's a first time for everything.
This guy stinks!
Stallone's absolutely incredible in this, and I'm just going to move on to my number 1 because it's clearly obvious now. At my number 1 is Creed, which builds off the backbone of one of the best films of all time, Rocky, and builds off the entire franchise, coming about one of the best legacy sequels of all time. It is everything that I wanted it to be when it was announced, and it became, honestly, everything that I could have expected when watching it. Stallone gave the best supporting actor performance of that year and absolutely was snubbed of the Oscar. He might have been nominated, but he should have won over Mark Rylance. There is no doubt about that. Stallone has never been better, and I still contend that's probably his best performance. Michael B. Jordan is phenomenal in this, and kind of seeing someone who wants to come out of his father's limelight, and seeing someone who, you know, when you get to the nitty-gritty of it all, just wants to be shown that he's not a mistake in this world. Which I think a lot of people can maybe feel that way when coming up, and specifically in how their families were. And for me, whether it's Ludwig's incredible score, which builds off the Rocky theme and creates Creed's own theme, or it's Ryan Coogler's direction, which I still think this is probably his strongest direction yet. This film builds and has a great balance of emotional, dramatic, deep storylines, and deep character studies and character development, as well as wonderful action and mixing the best of both worlds. The original Rocky film did, but just a tad bit better. And again, I know some people might be fueled by nostalgia to pick Rocky. For me, there's just something about Creed that every time I go back to watch it, it just knocks it right out of the park. And for me, it is the true knockout of this entire franchise, and it's a masterpiece. And with that said, that is going to be my Creed and Rocky franchise ranking. Thank you so much again for watching this, guys. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe and comment down below your guys' thoughts. And of course, until next time, stay classy.